Hello! Do you know that there are over 12,000 parish churches in England and Wales? And Simon Jenkins, in his book England's 1,000 Best Churches, says of St Wulfram's here in Grantham, here is the finest steeple in England. Let's go to the master, Nikolaus Pevsner, who says St Wulfram, many connoisseurs of English parish churches would list Grantham in their first dozen. What an absolutely fabulous church this is. Well before Salisbury, well before Norwich, before Coventry, before Louth, and in its day it was the tallest spire in the country. Grantham's slender spike is one of the most exhilarating images of English Gothic. The spire is 281 feet high, built between 1280 and 1300, and today we see it as the greatest spire in the country. Nothing subsequently erected, even in glorious Somerset, is quite its equal among churches. I mentioned Salisbury Cathedral, and that is the only comparison that can be made. Yet Grantham has always been a parish church, its majesty civic, not ecclesiastical. The quality of English church towers lies in the mason's ability to resolve horizontal and vertical elements. And the best towers in the East Midlands, as in here in Grantham, were earlier than those of East Anglia and Somerset, yet seem to have achieved this resolution in advance, because, as stated, this classic work began at the turn of the 14th century. In the 7th century there was a Saxon church here, but no trace of it is left. And of the succeeding Norman church there remains but 6 pillars in the nave. The tower now rises free of the roofline of the aisles. Then come 2 stages of bell openings, one with 2 windows, the next with just one. The tower is carefully tapered, with lines accentuated by angle buttresses. 4 pinnacles now effortlessly conceal the shift from spire tower into an octagonal spire. The taper of the spire seems perfectly judged, with its ribs and 3 tiers of diminishing lucarnes covered in boar flower, as if it's infested with golden snails. Here above the south porch is a chained library which is opened in the summer. This southern doorway dates from around 1230 or so. The interior of Grantham is a single vast rectangle. The arcades are a dignified jigsaw puzzle, the central four bays surviving in part from an earlier Norman church that was ruined in a mighty fire when hit by lightning in 1222. Greatest of the post-fire innovations, apart from the steeple, were the aisle windows. These present a sequence of English tracery through from 1280 to the advent of the Perpendicular period around 1350. In the last quarter of the 13th century, the nave was lengthened, the north doorway and north aisle built, and the foundations of the tower were laid. The last great enrichment was in the 15th century, when the Corpus Christi chapel was built to correspond with the Lady Chapel on the other side of the chancel. Look at this remarkable corbel table that seems to surround most of the exterior wall, especially on the south side, offering an extraordinary gallery of medieval carving. These grotesques are everywhere, extending beyond the customary gargoyles and corbels to include figures inserted apparently at random. Some are tiny, some monstrous, some human, some embracing each other. Some have fingers in their mouths, some are smiling, others sneering. But if the exterior of the church is impressive, the interior is hardly less so. The tower has a vault of 12 radiating ribs round a big circle for hoisting the bells through. Here we can see some royal arms, one dated 1586 and the other the arms of Grantham town, beneath which are the Stuart arms of the reign of Charles II. Two canopied recesses decorated with angels hold the tombs of Richard de Saltby and his wife, dated 1362. This monument to William Cust was sculpted in 1748. Looking closely, you can see the stitching around the buttonholes and the hairs on his head. Below the bust is an array of naval and military objects, swords, cannons, flags, and so forth. It cost £250, but the family weren't particularly happy with the likeness to William. There were no photographs, of course, for comparison, and William was buried at sea. The south aisle here, the chancel, is traditionally known as St Mary's Aisle or a Lady Chapel. The chapel here is the largest of the chapels in the church, built around 1350. Since 2020, it has also been the home of the specially installed reliquary that serves as the latest shrine to the church's patron, St Wulfram. The ornate carved and gilded shrine provides a focal point as the church marks its 1300th anniversary of Wulfram's death. A narrow spiral stairway in the wall of the aisle leads to a room above the south porch, which was formerly the dwelling place of the priest. It has a fireplace with raised hearthstone, a sink, and a recess for washing. On the inner wall is this little oriel window commanding a view of the whole church and the high altar. Here the priest could keep watch over the altar vessels and the shrine and relics above the north porch opposite. Towards the chancel, the larger arches in front of the screen were made to give light and space for the former rood screen. The wooden screen, the roofs and open plan layout you see here today all date from the late Victorian restoration of the church. The chancel reredos was installed in 1883 and then the border added in 1901. The tracery of all the 14th century windows, varied and graceful, the 6 pointed arches on each side of the nave. And look at this, a fine vaulted crypt, entered from the Lady Chapel. It still has its original door and ironwork, with a secret bolt opening by pressing an iron stud. There are 2 old chests, an arms chest and another large chest, which once held the church plate and various documents. Here you can see at the east end of the crypt a chapel which has an early stone altar. Throughout its history, the crypt has been used for various different purposes, including as a resting place for the relics of St Wulfram and as a storeroom for the church valuables and civic records. Descending the stairs, you notice that the stones have been turned over at some point because of the wear caused by many pilgrims who would have visited the relics. The stone altar step is also heavily worn by the knees of pilgrims as they prayed. There are 3 identical wagon roofs. The 15th century font has survived and is an impressive sight with its modern tabernacled cover, resplendent in gold and rising nearly as high as the arcades. The font is an elaborate piece of work. It's octagonal in form and bears in 8 panels representations carved in bold relief of various events from the scriptures. Thank you for watching this film of the magnificent church of St Wulfram in Grantham, Lincolnshire.